Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. The exchange of blows between Iran and Israel brings into focus the fact that for all the claims of sovereignty and independence, no nation or hybrid entities such as Gaza and Lebanon ruled by Hamas and Hezbollah fights alone. They all operate offensively or defensively as part of an alliance, a coalition, or an axis. In the Middle East, for short, it's the American Central Command versus the Revolutionary Guards, CENTCOM, against the RGC, each under a political echelon and with various affiliates. To help us understand the intricacies involved, we are joined from Central Israel by Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen, formerly an Israeli Air Force commander, a fighter pilot, as well as the chief of the IDF cyber staff. It's good to see you, General.
Good to see you.
Also joining us from elsewhere in the northern part of Israel is Brigadier General in Reserve Relik Shafir, who formerly also served as an Israeli Air Force commander and a fighter pilot, among others. It's good to see you as well, General.
Central Israel.
And indeed. Across the pond, joining us, but yet here in spirit, Mr. Amir Oren, our TV7 editor-at-large. Amir, take it away.
So, from biblical times, David against Goliath, we are used to put single fighters up front. But actually, it's not really Israel against Iran per se. There are, as you said, groupings, coalitions or alliances. And Israel does not fight alone, especially in the 10 months since October the 7th, and we are now in the first or second day of the 11th month already in August of, or is it the 10th? We lost count. But in any event, it's more than 300 days, and Israel has been backed by especially the United States. We have seen the CENTCOM Commander General Michael Eric Kurilla visit Israel constantly, including in recent days. He has actually an outpost here at the Hudson Air Base, which was in charge of the artificial pier jailhouse under a 3-star Army general, but they also have liaison functions, and of course other military forces. The British and others are operating in conjunction with Israel under American auspices in the Red Sea and elsewhere. And as for Iran, not only does it have proxies under it, such as Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and various militias, but it is also operating as part of the anti-American or anti-Western axis of Russia, China, and North Korea. So each member of these groups has their own interests, their own considerations. We have seen, for instance, in the Yom Kippur War, that Syrian President Hafez Assad had other ambitions than Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, and each tried in a tug of war to pull the rope into their own corner. So what will come out of these various deliberations remains to be seen.
General Rosen, I'd like to start with you, particularly if we zoom out for one moment from the region and still look at the region holistically. We see just recently the Russians deepening their strategic collaboration with the Iranians, not just by words, but also by deeds, integrating some very sophisticated jamming systems and other electronic warfare to try and bolster Tehran's defenses. We see the Secretary of the National Council of Moscow travel, namely Sergei Shoigu, traveled to Tehran to meet with the Commander-in-Chief or Chief of Defense of the Iranian military as well as the recently elected president of Iran, and really talking about all the different developments across the region. On the other hand, as Mr. Oren just mentioned, of course, General Michael Kurilla, Sing Central, has just now visited Israel. We see that also, if we take into context the last Iranian attack, the Chief of Defense of Great Britain visiting Israel just 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken. We're seeing the French collaborating with Israel and deepening discussions about missile and air defense, also with partners and allies in the region. But there is a somewhat two camps, the Western camps versus the Eastern camp, if I may call it that, trying to establish their parameters and their imprint into this volatile region. What are we to make out of it?
Jonathan, this has the whiff of pre-World War II. In so many ways, it's frightening. The destructive capacity of Iran and its aggressive and expansionist strategy call for action, just as Germany, Nazi Germany back then, had its aggressive and expansionist strategy towards Europe, later on towards the Jews as well. Iran has cleverly built a regional web of proxies, separating it from accountability in an artificial way. So the West sort of continues to negotiate with Iran as if it is a normal country. Iran is worse than North Korea. It's worse than Russia. And it is a threat to stability of the international community, to global commerce, to the global economy. It's a threat to Islam. It's a threat to the region. It's a threat to millions of Arabs. It's an outright existential threat to Israel. So the question is, with all this, what do we do? I mean, how does this look like for the Western side and Israel, of course? I think that the current situation shows also the dilemma for Iran. I mean, there's a reason we're seeing this sort of hesitance on Iran's side, because it has weaknesses as well. And the West and Israel, of course, because it's in the highest risk, we need to play very smartly here. Iran has, it's a huge country with so many borders. It has very old critical infrastructure and very few ports of entry. Its economy is reliant on oil, especially now when it's exporting oil to China and to Russia. It has nuclear ambitions, and this sort of timing that it did not exactly define is a thing, because Hezbollah is the insurance policy for the nuclear plans, for their nuclear plans. And so if I use my insurance policy now, how do I continue with my nuclear plans? All of this together calls for a coercive campaign. But the problem is that we, Israel and the West, we also have some weaknesses. The lack of consistency vis-a-vis Israel and vis-a-vis the United States and the Western coalition, if you will. This lack of consistency is just terrible for dealing with a country like Iran. The proxy war that Iran is fighting and the international community sort of accepting proxy war as okay and not connecting it to Iran without a real economic price, and all the rest of the issues that are connected to accountability are just, from Iran's side, the ROI is amazing. I mean, it's great for them. And the last thing I think which works against us is Iran's axis. We tend to call it axis of evil. The landmass from Iran to Iraq, the Shiite part of Iraq, into Syria, into Lebanon. This is a very important part of how Iran expands towards the West. And this is why it is a real threat, on top of that, to the Bab el-Mandab straits in the south where the Houthis are there. So we are in a dire situation, and this calls for consistency, and it calls for a strategy that needs to be in the offense and in the defense, really concentrated in Iran's weaknesses. And the greatest weakness is if we are able to consistently wage an asymmetrical war against Iran's weaknesses. That's the bottom line.
General Shafir, with a very precise picture just presented with General Rosen, I'd like to hear your perspective on the complexities, but also from an American perspective, since America is also considering various challenges to the east, namely China's growth of military prowess. It is contending also with the Ukrainian front, dealing with Russia's war of aggression for a couple of years now. How can it remain focused on those three major theaters at a time that even as we speak, just this last couple of days, they had to sign over the last remaining bases in Niger in Africa that is also showing a certain trend that the United States is losing footing in the forgotten stepson, as they call the African continent. Is this now a situation where we can expect a certain revamp of U.S. foreign policy in order to re-engage with also the region here in the Middle East at a time when the implications of what may evolve in the next several days and the next several weeks and months may truly dictate the course of history for many years to come?
I think from the United States point of view, if I understand it correctly, we're on the verge of United States losing interest in the Middle East and maybe even losing hope, except for President Biden's, I would say, pro-Israel sentiment. They would rather have us close the war business and let them take care of Southeast Asia, where the tensions are rising in the area of Taiwan, and facing China over Taiwan and the Ukraine, not knowing what the next president's policies will be. Is America going to be isolationist and, as they say, throw Israel under the bus in the sense that we don't really care what happens to you? That may take place with President Trump. It's difficult to understand where he will be going, mainly because he doesn't really. It looks like he doesn't know where he wants to go in this. Or certainly Kamala Harris, who doesn't have the same sentiment that President Biden has. So Israel does not go along or did not find a coexistence that is helpful in the international scene with the United States and with Europeans, and they are drawn into this maybe against their interests and wishes. So it really baffles whether this is going to continue for a length of time without Israel finding some means to work with the United States and the Europeans and creating some, I wouldn't say peace, but certainly pacifying the Middle East and the Palestinians in some manner. So the pressure from the United States on finishing the war in Gaza and subsequently with Hezbollah, who have already said that they will stop the fire and reach some kind of an understanding that Amos Hochstein is driving at, I think is of paramount existence. And President Biden didn't mince words when he told Netanyahu more or less what I've just said. On the other hand, if Iran tries something like the April shootout with 300 projectiles of different kinds at Israel, probably adding the Houthis and some Hezbollah, but only at military targets with minimal loss of life, then the Israeli strike back will probably be something um, uh, not significant enough to cause a retaliation. That would mean that Israel would not strike ports or industrial infrastructure, as Yaron had mentioned, but rather a base, anti-aircraft systems, the S-300, which is the advanced missiles, takes some of these out, but not beyond that, and that would at least pacify what's happening now, with the United States putting pressure on Israel to stop um, high-ended killings, such as Hania, etc. So the name of the game is actually an unstable situation that nobody really wants except Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah, because they're forced, more or less, they forced themselves into this, and Israel because it wants to show that it is able to subdue the Palestinians in Gaza, it is able to subdue the Palestinians in the West Bank, and thwart off Hezbollah off the northern border well enough for the Israeli citizens to return. That doesn't mean that there won't be a future war, but at least for the time being, pacify the area. So there's a clash of interest here between Israel, United States, and its allies.
A couple of points I'd like to state myself. The first one, subdue the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. I think that's maybe not the right focus, since it is part of the clans of the Palestinians in those two territories that have opted out of the mainstream so-called Palestinian authority-led governance system, and therefore they are more prone to Islamism as well as to serve their Iranian masters in Tehran, forcing Israel to deal with them concretely, and therefore to find alternatives in other clans within those territories is something that Israel has to do, and it does so in concert with the Palestinian Authority. This is something that is not said enough, so people realize that there is here an alignment of interests between the Western-backed Palestinian Authority and Israel in contending with this threat. Secondly, about isolationism, yes, there is a surge in the isolationist in the Republican Party of isolationism. Nevertheless, it's quite interesting, and that is something that was told to me by the foreign policy staff of the Trump campaign, including the team that is, at least part of the team that is going to assume the various roles potentially for the Middle East, that none of them are isolationists when it comes to Israel. So that is at least encouraging thought. Behind that, of course, once reality comes down to it, I think that Trump is seeking to further bolster the Abraham Accords, which he regards as his baby, which was also realized during his time. About Harris, other than her national security advisor currently as a vice president, I don't know much, so I cannot elaborate on that. Maybe Mr. Oren can do so, but I'm not familiar enough with what she's done in the last 4 years. Regrettably, I say so. But nonetheless, Mr. Oren, I'd like to hear your perspective on to what degree is Israel currently in a position where it can maneuver strategically to counter Tehran's strategy of removing the United States from the region, which is a declared foreign policy of the Islamic Republic, of deepening relations in the region with various Sunni Muslim actors, which is a declared foreign policy of Iran, of course, doing so at the expense of the Abraham Accords and relations with Israel as part of its aspiration within context of 12th Shiite Islam to eradicate the Jewish state of Israel.
Well, Israel shouldn't be perceived as conniving to put the United States under such constraints that it will have to act militarily against Iran. And that is part of the anger expressed at Netanyahu by the Biden administration. They don't believe that he is acting necessarily in Israel's best interests and definitely not in the American interest. Now, you, Jonathan, usually bemoan the lack of deterrence on the part of the current American administration. But the sad truth is that the American revolver is quite empty. Notwithstanding the carrier task forces and the F-22 squadron sent to the Middle East, there is neither political will nor enough American power to fight in the Middle East when they see China as their peer competitor and a major threat. And let me direct you to a very important article just published in Foreign Affairs by retired General Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who says that the United States is not ready for future wars, but what he really means is that at present, the US defense establishment is obsolescent, is tailored towards other wars in other eras, but not for artificial intelligence, robotics, swarms of drones, and other such devices of current conflict. And this is why Biden is not threatening Iran. He knows that he cannot make good on his threat if Iran does not bite. And maybe come next January, if, as you said, President Trump comes to power and he solves the conflict on the very first day, we won't have to wait for the rest.
Well, we can only hope and pray, but that's a different story. We have roughly 2.5 minutes left for General Shafir and Rosen to provide a brief analysis about what they expect to happen in the near future, of course, with a number of anecdotes. But what can we expect from a strategic level? Okay, that is important to emphasize. What can we expect? General Rosen.
I think what we'll see here in the next few days, because this is really like we're in the game, in the high season of the game. I think what we will see is some form of retaliation, whether it is a blend of military and military targets and critical infrastructure targets, yet to be seen. It might be both. But I think that the Israeli defense will play a very important role in how this turns out. And I think what really matters is what happens after the retaliation. Now, if we connect it to the what happens, right? Like if it kills, if it destructs, if, then Israel should retaliate or re-retaliate. That's one thing. And if if the defense was so good like it was in April, Israel shouldn't retaliate. I think that would be a second mistake. Yet again, Israel needs to coerce Iran out of trying to destruct Israel. Now, it's very clear. That's what they want to do. And they're saying it very plainly and openly. And therefore, we have to start fighting back offensively in the right way with the right strategy. And that's what I think and I hope we'll start seeing. And maybe the first targeted assassinations against the leadership is a good start, but it's not enough. Now we need to continue that in an asymmetrical war of attrition on Iranian assets all over the region, proxies and directly under the threshold of war.
Thank you, General Rosen. General Shafir, you have roughly 1 minute and 45 seconds.
I think Israel cannot tackle Iran on its own. Iran is backed by China and Russia. The Russians are next door in Syria. And an open conflict with Iran. The last time that we went for an open assassination in 1992. Yaron probably remembers who shot Nasrallah's predecessor. We had the Israeli embassy in 92 and the Israeli and the Jewish Center in Argentina blown up. And I think taking on Iran in a war of attrition, we've been doing this, by the way, for quite a while, is going beyond our limits and beyond our capabilities. We need to work with and make friends with allies, with the United States and Europe to create pressure on Iran. Because the next thing that will happen is Iran are going to get Su-35s, squadrons that are something like F-15s, S-400, which might curtail the ability to employ the Air Force. This is 1,500 kilometers from home, and I think this is beyond our limits at this point in time, and we should coordinate more with others rather than take it all on our shoulders.
Mr. Oren, when you said about the United States having to contend with China, we need to remember that strategic power competition is global in essence, and if to contend with China is necessary, it means on a global scale and not necessarily only in the southeast of Asia. Go ahead.
8 months before, General Shafir almost single-handedly, with only 7 partners, bombed Iraq. The Iranians tried it to no effect. One hopes that they will also fail this time, but one doesn't mind if they say that they succeeded greatly and that the Israelis are covering up the real extent of the damage.
Well, General Rosen, General Shafir, and Mr. Oren, this is all the time we have for today, and I'd like to appreciate you for your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.